Hey YouTube, Sean from Top 5 Fit. Wanted to do a review today over a race that we did that was about a week ago, about 7 days ago. We'll go through the who, what, where, when, and why of this event, as well as what recovery was like. I wanted to wait until at least a full 7 days after the event so I could give you a very accurate description of what I actually went through and what the results were of attempting such a race. So the name of the event was the Burning River 50-mile, 100-mile endurance run. Now I do have a little bit of history with this race. I've attempted the 100-mile twice. The first time crashed and burned at 52 miles. The second time, not necessarily a crash and burn. I definitely felt a lot better, but we only made it to 63 and change. It's a time issue. The Rhino is not very fast on the trails. So I basically showed up to, on that second attempt, I showed up to an empty black parking lot. The aid station that was supposed to be there had already packed up and taken off. And that's not their fault. They have timelines and cutoffs that they have to follow. I just didn't get there in time. So this year we decided to go after the 50 mile. It seemed a little bit more apropos, if you will, just having a family and not really going after distances like that for a while. And basically making it past the 50-mile mark on the first two attempts, I figured why not. A couple of different training approaches though, as far as this was concerned. Right away, and I know this is going to sound weird to a lot of endurance athletes that hear this, but I really only gave it about 60 days to prepare for this. Now, that doesn't mean I went from the couch to 60 days of just straight running. Changed the focus up a little bit. So pretty much since the beginning of the year, we've maintained a mileage base of about 50 to 60 miles a week, which is a combination of running and biking. I have a lot of clients who are triathletes. I also have a lot of clients who are straight runners. And when it comes to the count at which people present injuries and issues to me, it's a lot higher with the sole runners. So that cross training, it's important. It needs to be there. For me, the bike is a big deal. It really helps get your hips and knees into positions that you don't really see when you're running. You can become very limited and locked into specific patterns of movement, and that can tighten things up and create issues. And the whole point of engaging in such races and training is ultimately to better your life, not make it worse. So we try really hard to keep that in mind as we were going through the conditioning. So 50 to 60 miles per week with at least a solid 3, maybe 4 days worth of strength training. 2 of those days focusing on the legs, strength, and 2 of those days focusing more on the endurance capacity of the legs. So much higher reps, moderate rate, weight kind of thing. The focus of the training going into this was not necessarily to push through as many miles as I possibly could, but to go into the event as strong as possible. In the past, there's a race that's about 2 weeks before Burning River. It's called the Buckeye 50K. And that is all backwoods trail, Buckeye Trail, in this area. And it's extremely hilly and extremely challenging. Now, a lot of the distance runners that I had listened to in the past had basically told me that that's a great way to prep for Burning River. And I listened, of course. When you want to know a thing, you tend to listen to people that have done things. And I did just that. The problem that I experienced was both times showing up to the start line of Burning River, I didn't exactly feel recovered. I felt like my legs were still kind of trashed. So this time around, we backed the goal down to the 50 mile, and we focused on feeling good and keeping things moving properly, keeping strength levels up. The cardiovascular component was maintained fine by the 50 to 60 mile mark each week. So we just left it at that. Race morning comes, the race actually starts at 5. There's an early start, which is 5 o'clock. And then there's the 6 o'clock start for relay teams and whatever else. Now, I chose the front 50. If you're going to run the 50 mile option, you can choose the front 50 or the back 50. I chose the front because the back 50 is brutal. It's kind of where the dance begins. You basically get onto the Buckeye Trail, which I've talked about earlier, and you don't get off until the race is done. And that's fine if you are a 130-pound mountain goat, because you're doing a lot of climbing and a lot of descending, and the switchbacks and turns, they can tear your legs apart. So I decided to go after the 50 because, again, the idea is I need to go to work the next day. We need to be able to get back to making videos. We need to get back to being, I guess, present and functional for our clientele. So 50 miles it was. Start line, get to moving. There was a guy by the name of Roy. I won't go say his last name, but years ago I remember him saying, because, well, he does 100-mile races all the time, and he made the statement, you should start off walking. You should just go for a cruise at the very beginning. Let everybody run in front of you, because in about 5 to 6 hours, you'll start passing them. And that's kind of what happened. The start lines can be very exciting. So your adrenaline's up, you're hopping about, you're making sure your gear's all where it's supposed to be, and then you hear that gun and you take off. Well, there's a lot of starting off too fast issues. You put way too much energy into the first 10, and the next 10 is a death march. So we listened to exactly what Roy had to say, and we walked for about the first 2 miles, kept it at about a 16-minute mile pace. And then after that, you kind of fall into a trot. I was around 12, 13-minute miles up until about the 50K mark. Mile 31 hit, the legs, well, they didn't feel too hot. A lot of spasming in the tissue, a lot of random just tightening, and then things would kind of feel unstable. Now, right away, there'll be discussion on things like nutrition and hydration. So to give you an idea of what I was doing, I had 5. I purposely bought 5 because the idea is if I bought 6, I was out there too long. I got 5 meal replacement shakes, which ultimately had 35 grams of carbohydrates, 25 grams of protein, and some fat mixed in there as well. The supplemental nutrients came from jerky, which I made homemade and didn't buy the over sodium loaded stuff from the shelves. And then Cheez-Its, because it's a comfort food and it kind of settles the tummy down too if the acid's a little high. So we're cruising along, drinking every half an hour or so, and then going after food or some type of chewable about every 45 minutes. And for the first 30 miles, 28 to 30 miles, that was actually working just fine. Temperature was around 80, 85. It wasn't overly hot, but I definitely felt a drop in performance if I tried to speed up at any point in time. Throughout the race, you'll have these little bursts of energy and you'll want to pick up pace, and it'll be very natural to want to pick up pace. The problem comes in when, oh yeah, I've got another 15 miles to go, and you just soaked up some energy. So we tried to really stay into that 13 to 15 minute mile range, just so that we weren't overdoing it with fluid loss and nutrient burnup. So get to about, like I said, the 50K mark, and that's when things kind of went south. They didn't really feel that well. Had a lovely couple sweeping the trail behind me. And what I mean by sweeping the trail is they were actually picking up the marking flags that, they put flags down so that you know where you're going so you don't get lost, because there are points where you're going to be by yourself. And I'm one of those that was basically alone for the entire time of the race. So those flags really do help. But the trail cuts through the Cuyahoga Valley National Park, and they don't like litter. And part of the deal is you've got to make sure you actually clean up after yourself. So these two people, man and a woman, they were following me. And at one point, I actually turned around and said, you two are the most polite Grim Reapers I have ever had following me. They never made a sound. They very politely and quietly picked up the flags and, stayed back far enough that I didn't feel like I was rushing because they were there. And then after about 20 minutes of that shit, I said, hey, get up here so we can talk. And this is where you kind of decide how far you want to go. You're bouncing it off of other people's heads. And the woman that was with us was in a discussion with somebody else on her phone who had designs on finishing the 100-mile mark. And this person had reached the 50-mile mark and their bodies were a little torn up. And now there's the discussions that are taking place between two people on either side of this person, one saying keep going, one saying stop. So after about maybe 10 minutes, 15 minutes of discussion, the decision was made to stop. He was going for the 100-mile mark, and he only wanted to go another 5 miles. We decided not to do the next 5 miles because the difference comes, it kind of comes down to if you run 55 miles and you're injured for 6 months versus stopping at 50 and potentially getting back on your feet the next week. So to some degree, common sense has to come into play here. So they decided, I should say, to stop at the 50-mile mark and save the body, which of course made me start thinking about my own position. Had gotten to the 40-mile mark, and it's a 15-hour cutoff. I was at 13 hours and change. The likelihood of me speeding up at that point was not very high. And at the same time, we want to save the body. We're not trying to destroy ourselves. So 40 miles is what it is. We got off the trail, got picked up, went home, called it a day. So that's the race. That's the stuff that, people talk about all the time, and you'll get, whether or not they loved it or it turned them into an animal because now they feel empowered because they can do what they want. Let me give you some of the ugly details past that. So got home at about 7:30 that night. There was no temperature regulation at all. Pretty much went from a state between shivering and sweating profusely. There was no homeostatic level line as far as body temperature. The muscles felt fatigued isn't a way to put it. Fatigue implies that I could mentally say, hey, you need to get up because we've got work to do. This was more of a shutting down. Musculature didn't want to move. If I actually tried to get up from a seated position, not only was there a spasm, but there was a giving out sensation. Things would actually just kind of collapse and really not want to cooperate at all. So there was definitely a feeling of vulnerability there that we didn't really like. Now, normally, I don't do any kind of painkillers. I don't have anything against them. It's just a dance that I really don't want to participate in. So it kind of went against the grain to finally admit at one point that you're going to take some ibuprofen, you're going to drink a lot of water, and you're going to go to bed. And you're going to try and deal with this tomorrow. Sunday morning comes, and it's pretty much exactly like I thought it would be. Felt like I got hit by a truck. No real joint discomfort, but the soreness between the legs, the traps, the biceps, believe it or not, from the arm swinging for that long, became very uncomfortable. Grabbing glasses of water throughout the day have never been so challenging, but just that motion of actually trying to contract your bicep, it wasn't great. I have kids, and kids like to jump on you. When you're, I guess, trying to be a good parent, the last thing you're going to do is deny your children a little bit of fun, especially if it's harmless fun. So of course, let all of the kids just jump all over, which screamed every time it happened. The muscles were so tender that anytime a foot or an elbow or anything came in contact with it, it felt like someone was hitting me with a bat. The pain was very amplified. So it kind of rolled through that. The nutrition and hydration for the day, I was probably sitting at close to, by the end of that day, about 2 gallons worth of water. Just trying to, again, flush the system, get the pee back to a normal color. Nutrition, vegetables, fruit, and protein. That was really all I could stomach at the time. And that was up till about maybe 7 or 8 o'clock that night. And then that's when the appetite picked back in. I don't know if maybe the eating lighter throughout the day kind of primed the appetite, or the body finally realized what the hell it had just gone through. But Ended up going over to my parents' house, and my mom likes to cook, and sometimes she cooks very rich. And the fried fish, macaroni and cheese, and green bean casserole never tasted so good. The caloric expenditure for the day was sitting right around 8,000, 9,000 calories for the day. So I wasn't too concerned about what I was taking in that night. So I just let it happen. And it was grimy and it was ugly, but I think it helped. Monday morning, wanted to try to get back to some kind of normalcy. So the first thing I went after was the bike ride. Bike has always been there. Like I said, I'm big on getting bike mileage in because it cleans up the joints, kind of gets things moving in planes that you don't normally see when you're on the run. So this was, it was a good idea to get that done. 10 miles, come home. Yard work is the second measure of how fast you're recovering. So got out into the yard, picked some weeds, cut the grass, so on and so forth. By the way, cutting the grass, it was almost like watching somebody with a walker trying to move through the yard. Things were definitely uncomfortable, but it got done. And then the end of the day, you know, went back to bed, maintained the same eating patterns, and then kind of moved on to Tuesday. Tuesday morning, we were able to hit a 15-mile ride. That actually felt a lot better. Some strength was there. No difficulty in breathing, which was nice. And started thinking, hey, you bounce back pretty quick. So we went for a lift. Not recovered yet. Got under 135 pounds on the squat rack and literally sat down. Dropped straight to the floor, racked the weight, and went home. It's not time to lift yet. So finished up with more yard work, more clean eating, went to bed, called it another day. The next morning, got up again, same thing, about 10 miles on the bike. Went over to a client's house early in the morning and then went straight to the gym after that. Decided to make it a machine day. Pretty much covered just about every lower body exercise that I could find, as well as a dabble here or there of the upper body. Things started to feel better, definitely feeling better, but not a time to push anything in the strength category at all. Thursday, Friday, basically felt pretty normal. There really was no lingering soreness from the weekend at all. I'd have to say that strength capacity was about 75, 85%. This past weekend, got a decent lift in again. We're pushing around 80, 85% or so, at least as far as output and what we feel is normal as far as our strength training is concerned. And then the bike rides on top of it. And then back to a full lift this morning, 315 on the decline bench, got under 405 under the squat for a couple of sets of 4. Leg press, didn't go beyond 600 pounds on that. And some various arm work, hammer curls, concentration curls, a little bit of tricep work here and there. So all in all, I'd have to say it took about a solid at least 7 days, maybe 8 days or so before I actually felt normal, or what I would call normal. Now, when it's all said and done, you get a lot of questions. Would you do it again? Do you want to do it again? Is it something that's going to bother you because you didn't finish? Not necessarily. The idea was, can I go through 30, 40 miles worth of moving, and can I bounce back? At the tender age of thousands of years old, it becomes more about recovery and what you can actually take. And if I just focus on the fact that I didn't cross the finish line and didn't get a medal, because I'm a medal whore and I like shiny things, if I just kind of focus on that, that's where you can kind of lose sight of why you were out there. The point was, I have clients who engage in endurance activities. I have people who want to engage in endurance activities, and it's kind of something I've taken upon myself to make sure that I give an accurate account of what actually goes on. So, having said all of that, I hope you found some of this helpful, some of it informative. If you have any questions or concerns, feel free to throw them in the comment box, and don't forget to hit subscribe because there will be more videos. Thanks again for watching.